I told each one of them my conversation separately. Whatever they need, I mean this sincerely, whatever they need, contact me directly. And they know how to do that. I have a lot of personnel down there already. We're here to support them in every way we can.
On the other side of the spectrum, while Biden has been grinding out the sometimes thankless job of governing, Republicans have been waging these giddy little culture wars, to own the libs, while ignoring their citizens' basic rights and needs. Take, for example, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, who told a crowd of supporters how thrilled he was to leave Jackson, the state capital, in the midst of a devastating collapse of the city's water system. This after he spent years bragging about how successful he's been at blocking funds to fix the water crisis in the past. Then there's book-banning Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's drawn massive protests and walkouts by high school students over his use of his executive power to force schools to out transgender students' birth sexes against their will. That's the priority of a whole entire governor? In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has spent the majority of his term waging wars against Disney while pretty openly running for president on the side, sticking Florida taxpayers with a $2 trillion bill in the process, while also attacking books and history and masks and Venezuelan migrants who aren't even in his state, flying them from Texas at exorbitant rates to Massachusetts, again, at Florida taxpayer expense, maybe even breaking the law in the process. And let's just be clear. He is doing this as his audition to have Joe Biden's job. But is that what voters really hire an executive for? While DeSantis is fighting with Mickey and scoring hits on Fox News, Florida teachers are fleeing his state. Climate change is ravaging the coast, and the state's home insurance market is literally collapsing, leaving thousands of Floridians in danger of having no coverage for their homes when natural disasters like Hurricane Ian strike. And that last bit is important because preparing for and dealing with hurricanes is kind of what Florida governors do. And making sure that people have insurance, well, it is kind of key. Right now, Ian is a fierce Category 3 hurricane curving its way up the Gulf Coast of Florida. It is expected to strengthen into a catastrophic Category 4 over the warm Gulf waters with anticipated landfall tomorrow evening. The entire Gulf Coast of Florida could suffer devastating storm surges and rain. Both mandatory and voluntary evacuations are in place for more than 2.5 million people in multiple counties where schools have already been closed. President Biden has preemptively declared a state of emergency and already sent aid.
I directed my team to surge federal assistance there before the storm hit. FEMA has already deployed 700 personnel to Florida, and the governor has activated 5,000 state National Guard with another 2,000 guards coming from other states. FEMA is also proposing and pre-positioning 3.5 million liters of water, 3.7 million meals, and hundreds of generators.
Which, again, is literally the job. Joining me now from Anna Maria Island on Florida's Gulf Coast is NBC's Kerry Sanders. I'm also joined by Democratic pollster and strategist Fernand Amandi and retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore, the former commander of the Hurricane Katrina Joint Task Force. But Kerry, my friend, I do want to start with you. Talk about how things look, where you are, and how bad local folks expect this storm to be by tomorrow.
Well, Joy, I'm way down here by water's edge to just sort of share a feeling. The water here that I have my feet in, it's warm. In fact, there are parts of the Gulf of Mexico which are feeding Ian that are 89 degrees. So, we know that a hurricane gets its strength from the warm water. And at 89 degrees, that's like throwing gasoline on a fire. I mean, it is just incredibly warm, at least in some cases, 5 degrees warmer than we would typically have. So that's why we're going to see perhaps even more of a rapid intensification of the hurricane. Where I'm here on Anna Maria Island, pretty much a ghost town. Same thing down on Sanibel Island, Captiva Island, on some of the smaller islands like Usepa, Cabbage Key. That's because they have these mandatory evacuations because they know in addition to the wind that will be whipping, there will be something called storm surge. So you see the water here behind me right now. the wind will be so strong at 100+ miles an hour, it actually blows the water, and that water comes up like this, and it sort of kind of goes in a dome, but it has nowhere to go, so it just keeps traveling. And the prediction is that the storm surge could be as high as 10 feet. So right now I'm at sea level. I'm 5'5", 10 feet's way up there. As we get a little bit closer to the homes, some of the homes are up maybe about 2.5 feet. So it is possible here and on other islands like Sanibel, Captiva, it's possible that the water will actually wash over the islands. So there's a great amount of concern. The authorities said, got to get out, mandatory evacuations. We know that some people have decided to stay behind. And the police and fire say, look, if you stay behind and you're in the middle of the hurricane and you do dial 911, nobody's coming to the rescue, Joy.
Yeah, real quick, to stay with you just for a second, Carrie, because I only have to, anyone who's lived in Florida for any length of time, and I lived there 14 years, it's where I met you, my friend, you just have to say Andrew. I mean, this was such a catastrophic change in everything about Florida. And you know, Jeb Bush was sort of made by his handling of hurricanes. Can you just talk just briefly about how important managing hurricanes is to the job of being governor in Florida?
Well, you know, during Andrew, it was a complete failure on all levels in terms of the response afterwards, especially with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA, which, you know, is supposed to, and this case, and we have seen in recent other hurricanes, have gotten professional. At the time, it was like a political dumping ground where they just gave people political favors, stuck them into these jobs. They didn't know anything about responding. It is now very much a professional organization. And we know, for instance, Kevin Guthrie, who does the state version of that here in Florida, that they have experience. Kevin, in fact, worked at Pasco County. He's dealt with hurricanes, but he's also dealt with sinkholes. He knows what has to happen when you respond in an emergency. So I think that when we just heard the president talk about prepositioning water and food and generators and all, that is pretty much very much a professional operation as opposed to what we once had. Lessons learned from Andrew. And of course, you know, the hurricane, if it does come in just a little south of here, it was 2004 when Category 4 Hurricane Charlie came in. And so there are lots of people who remember that. And there are a lot of people who say they will work forward from those memories of how to better respond to this hurricane. Joy?
Yeah, indeed. Carrie Sanders, thank you very much, my friend. Stay safe. Really appreciate you. And, you know, the other sort of one-word name that you can just say that everyone understands what it is Katrina. And General Russell Honore, people know you from, you know, having been in the middle of that. Just talk about just the level of government sort of intersectional cooperation between the state and the federal government that is critical and crucial to doing this right.
Yes. On any given day, a storm like this can break and overmatch the state's capacity. It can overmatch the federal government capacity. And we have to work in harmony. And we put a lot of money in the federal government to be able to help the states respond when they become overwhelmed. And by the fact that the governor asked and the president has declared this a major disaster, and FEMA has already sent in the Region 4 directed to set with the governor from Atlanta to Florida, joining a very experienced team in the state of Florida who, since Andrew as a mark point, another mark point was Wilma, and another mark point that same year was Katrina, have developed procedures. All the governor have to do is read the script. And he's doing a darn good job doing that right now. They have procedures in Florida to protect their people as best they can from a storm this magnitude. But I think, Joy, this will set a new bar, something they had not seen or America has not seen before if this storm come in the way it's predicted.
And I lived through Wilma, so I definitely remember that. And it's terrifying to actually live through it. I want to bring you in, Fernand, to the very point that General Honore has made. Like today, Ron DeSantis did not have room to troll or play troll. He actually has to play governor now. Here he is in part of the press conference. This was about an hour ago a little over an hour ago, this was his press conference, talking about the federal response.
We feel like we have a good relationship with FEMA. You know, I'm happy to brief the president if he's interested in hearing what we're doing in Florida. You know, my view on all this is like, you know, you got people's lives at stake, you got their property at stake, and we don't have time for pettiness. We got to work together to make sure we're doing the best job for them. So my phone line is open.
I mean, that happens to be true. You know, I mean, over the course of this summer, we've watched the Florida insurance market collapse. We've watched a lot of drama coming out of that governor's office that's been around immigration, even though Florida's not even close to the state with the most migrants or the most people who are seeking asylum. Florida's like way at the bottom, below Ohio. And yet the governor has been just fixated on this one thing, on immigration. You know, is it arguable, if this doesn't go well, and we pray that it goes well, and for you down there, my friend, as well, that he's now really in a spotlight for the actual job he was hired for, not for the trolling?
Yeah, how shameful to hear those words. Too little, too late, Joy, because as you said, all of us here in Florida, in this very ominous and sobering moment now, we're on the brink of not one, but two catastrophes. First, there is the catastrophe of Ian, which, God forbid, I mean, have any impact on human life and any other folks that are in the path of that storm, including, by the way, my parents and many of my friends up and down I-4 all the way to the Panhandle. The problem here is the second catastrophe, which was wholly preventable, and that, as you said, is the property insurance catastrophe that Ron DeSantis and the Republican legislature in this state have conscientiously avoided doing a single thing about. They've been rolling the dice, and they've been lucky over the last couple of years. We haven't really had a major storm, but now we got a Cat 4 catastrophe knocking on our door. And after the damage to life and property comes the accounting. We don't have a private insurance market. They're fleeing the states. Rates are skyrocketing, Joy. And despite the begging and pleading of members of the Democratic side of the legislature, even some Republican senators who said, please, we have to solve this property insurance crisis, Ron DeSantis did nothing, partially because he's in the pocket of the insurance industry. But even State Senator Jeff Brandeis, who is a Republican from St. Petersburg, the area that is now in the direct line of that direct strike, said they did nothing. They didn't do nearly enough. And now the people of Florida are going to face this catastrophe, not once, but twice, because Ron DeSantis and the Republicans that have been in charge of this state for 28 years, Joy, have done nothing.